Video games are one of the most fascinating mediums out there. I play them for a variety of reasons. To unwind, to challenge myself, and to explore settings and scenarios my normal life will never provide. But the art form is truly elevated when it's used as a vehicle for interactive fiction. Japanese developers have long understood this potential, with an embarrassment of riches defining the gaming of my youth. Whilst the Western games industry has caught up and, in some cases, even surpassed Japan's stranglehold on digital storytelling, these developers still have an uncanny ability to break the mold and surprise even the most jaded gamer. 2011's Catherine is one such product. Described by its team as an unconventional romantic horror, billed as a high production value visual novel married to a challenging puzzle game, and looking like a beautiful 3D animation come to life, Catherine was destined to stand out. Its focus is locked squarely on its tantalizing tale of sex, infidelity and faithfulness, and it presents these adult themes alongside a damning commentary of modern society. Catherine is a story full of scumbags, and it doesn't shy away from that fact. Protagonist Vincent Brooks is a bumbling mess of paranoia and insecurities, a man who constantly frets about the future without ever truly committing to it. He's plagued with indecision, most of all concerning his girlfriend Catherine McBride, that's Catherine with a K, who wants nothing more than to settle down and start a family, something Vincent isn't sure he wants. On a night out alone, drinking at a bar and longing for things to stay the same, Vincent is visited by an ethereal beauty named Catherine, with a C, seemingly a manifestation of his own doubts, and wakes up the next morning to find her in his bed. So starts Catherine, a story filled with lovable characters that don't deserve love, morally ambiguous choices in rainbow shades of grey, and some seriously bizarre late-game plot twists. But despite all of that, despite Catherine's many missteps and fumbles, it still comes away as one of the best Japanese video games of its generation. The core of the gameplay proper is a block-pushing puzzle game that makes up Vincent's haunting nightmares. Nightmares that have begun to plague and kill unfaithful men the world over. You see, these dreams have a catch: die in them and you die in real life. By pushing and pulling blocks of varying attributes into terrifying, towering constructs, Vincent is able to climb away from the subconscious fears that plague him, his girlfriend in a wedding dress, a baby screaming for its daddy, and return to the relative calm of his waking life. The symbolism of this eternal ascent isn't hard to grasp, and as Vincent overcomes these fears in his dreams, he begins to surmount them in the real world. He isn't the only climber, however. There's a whole society of sheep attempting to reach the tower's zenith, and as Vincent interacts with them on the plateaus between each stage, we start to get to know them as well. They all bleat about their problems, are haunted by their own demons, and you can even run into their real-life counterparts during the day. Playing agony aunt to them in one realm changes their outlook and determination in the other. Ignore them instead, however, and you'll see their corpses reported on the evening news. This spirit of camaraderie is echoed throughout the title. By helping your fellow sheep, sharing techniques with each other and simply listening to each other's woes, the game encourages and even rewards the type of male support systems that society so often struggles with. There's a movement currently for men to talk about their insecurities, fears and depression with each other, despite centuries of reinforcement for men to be strong and to suffer in silence. And Catherine was, rather brilliantly, embodying this movement all those years ago. When you're not pushing blocks, you're in the bar drinking, though you can push blocks here too if you can't get enough of it. This bar, the Stray Sheep, is a watering hole for Catherine's various miscreants, and it's where Vincent can vent about his latest romantic faux pas to his closest friends. As you pound drinks and field loaded text messages from either Catherine, you face the game's panel of judges. Vincent's deeds are condemned or celebrated by Toby, Johnny, Orlando, and Erica, who weigh in on his unenviable situation with a variety of moral compasses. They're a refreshingly human bunch too, with their own histories, proclivities and tendencies coming to light through their imperfect advice and friendly banter. This theme of judgment is at the heart of Catherine, unsurprising considering the subject matter and the ever-present morality meter. It's an admirable accomplishment, then, that the game never directly judges you for your actions. Occasionally it will ask you a prying question that captures a fleeting moment of humanity. Would you break up with a cheating spouse? Does life begin or end with marriage? Are you a pervert? It tallies your answers with those of players around the world and asks you to judge and be judged in return. But, with society acting in their stead, the developers never feel the need to weigh in themselves. This reluctance is integral to Catherine's success. In its lack of binary good versus evil, Catherine finds a unique spin in a genre that all too often feels linear. Over its 8 wildly different endings, the game understands that being bad can lead to something good, whilst trying to be good can easily lead to something toxic and painful for everybody involved, setting out to muddy its own moral waters by presenting all 3 members of its love triangle as flawed, broken, manipulative, selfish, loyal, loving, confused, and human. Because of this, it feels surprisingly mature and grounded, even whilst its stories become weirder and more fantastical with every chapter. Even the morality meter reveals itself to be more complicated than initially expected, with even the most nondescript choices in the game sending its dial wobbling one way or the other. The game further does away with this black and white notion of morality, foregoing its focus on fidelity in favour of independence, loyalty, societal expectations, gender roles, maturity and responsibility. This game, that takes place in a bar or in bed, belies a variety of measuring sticks, ultimately tracking chaos versus order, animal instinct versus a concerted effort to rise above such base desires, freedom or compromise. Pretty soon, the bar stops obsessing with Catherine with a C or a K, and instead moves on to how we strive to live, a question that's at the heart of Japanese society.
Did you happen to notice the central conflict that this game's masterful creators placed at its core?
Behind its sordid storylines, Catherine is a game that's intent on tackling a huge problem in Japan. As these macabre and deadly dreams continue to plague the men of Catherine's world, their purpose is slowly revealed to be far less one-dimensional than faithfulness. Instead of simply trapping cheaters into these death games, the victims are actually those unwilling to procreate. Japan is suffering from a population problem. Whilst the rest of the world seems to be getting more crowded by the minute, the island nation is dwindling fast, with more deaths reported than births every year. Its people are far less interested in sex and marriage than ever, and it's a problem that the government is working hard to address, though the results thus far have been less than stellar. There's a lot of factors, of course, but Catherine zeroes in on a major one. The rise of the so-called herbivore man in Japan has been well documented, single men intent on staying that way. These men have a self-proclaimed aversion to the new generation of independent, career-driven women thriving in Japan, and see porn as a much easier and less intimidating alternative to dating. In their own words, these women scare them, and the fear of rejection is too great to bother pursuing relationships. In Catherine, Atlas sought to skewer these herbivores, these sheep, and they went for the jugular. This demographic of men, who simultaneously long for a more traditional, subservient partner whilst also refusing to chase relationships themselves, demand an almost paradoxical ideal, a demure, traditional woman content with being the housewife of yore, whilst being sexually aggressive enough to make advances towards them in their stead. In Catherine, Atlas gave these men exactly what they wanted in C, a buxom, blonde beauty who is cute and shy, but also remarkably forward when it comes to sex, who confuses negligee with outerwear and sends dirty pictures to Vincent throughout the day, who constantly finds her way into his bed by morning, but asks nothing more from him than to hang off his arm. She echoes Vincent's own misgivings about settling down, parrots back to him what he wants to hear, and in doing so offers a fantasy for not only Vincent, but a section of Catherine's own player base. It's no surprise her design has a great big bow on it. Catherine comes quite literally gift-wrapped for her fans of an impossible image. But make no mistake, whilst Catherine represents a viable choice in the game, she's designed as a critique of the tastes of Japan's New Age man, and it lands hard. Kei, on the other hand, represents the polar opposite, the very image of a woman that scares these men into inaction, and her stereotype is almost as damning. She's aggressively demanding, insistent on commitment so as to avoid becoming a Christmas cake girl. Much like how Christmas cake simply isn't eaten in Japan after the 25th of December, this slang refers to women who are over 25 and, as such, are seen as no longer viable for motherhood or dating. It's a pervasive notion that, whilst having slackened recently to the 30s as the cutoff point, a New Year's girl if you will, still very much exists in Japanese society. Catherine, who is in her early 30s, is violently pushing for Vincent to make up his mind or to get off the ride. Much like its notion that all men are cheating, indecisive scum, Catherine is equally as pessimistic in its view of women. But strangely, in its own overt negativity, Catherine provides a rallying cry to Japan's youth. It sends up these tropes to be deconstructed, makes them ludicrous to perhaps undo some of their power, and in its final, blatant message of the importance of procreation, seeks to avoid the demographic time bomb currently threatening the country. Next year is packed to bursting with promising games, with Japanese development especially poised to make a serious comeback. But out of all the upcoming releases, the title I'm most excited to play is Catherine Full Body, a massively expanded and significantly altered title that looks to toe the line between remake, expansion pack and sequel. When Catherine originally released in 2011, its themes felt impressive and important, despite its problematic representation. In the 7 years since its debut, Full Body will be releasing to a world where the conversation has evolved significantly. As a massive fan of the game, I'm hopeful, despite the team's questionable track record, that the game likewise evolves in its handling of such topics. With the new addition to the cast, Catherine with a Q, or Rin, it looks like Vincent might be getting a trans love interest, making the love triangle a love square, and should this be the case, I'm hopeful the team can avoid the hurtful missteps it's made in the past. Because despite it all, Catherine was a game utterly unlike any other. In it, we didn't simply see the story of an indecisive man struggling with his mistakes. We're not just asked to piece his life back together and make an arbitrary choice of which girl we like the most. In Catherine, we're given a stark look into the crisis of a country through the crisis of humanity writ large. Occasionally, its ambitious themes are handled with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer to the face, but every now and then Catherine surprises with a deft touch and a keen eye. In a medium made up of titles eager to judge us, Catherine was happy to sit back and let us judge ourselves. As always, thanks for watching. Catherine is an absolutely killer game and one of my favourites, so I was pumped to be able to put together a video on exactly why I love it. More and more these videos are becoming a collaborative effort, and I want to take a moment and thank Alex Beach for his help with the script on this one. Despite both loving Catherine, we've argued about the game for as long as I've known him, and when I started this project I went and argued with him some more. Without his input, this video wouldn't have been nearly as full-bodied as it is now. If you didn't agree with any of my points, they were probably his. I also want to thank Patrick for another on-point track that stands shoulder to shoulder with the rest of Catherine's fantastic OST. Tom Barrett, who always has the time to help me source some Japanese footage and slap some subtitles on it, and Rayloy, who helped chart some visual trickery in this episode. When I started this project, I polled my Twitter followers about Catherine's best girl. If you're interested in weighing in on such topics in the future, follow me at the link below and you can also be wrong about things like this. If, instead, you agree with them and think C is the best girl, hit the like button so I can mourn the taste of humanity at large.